The FIA ruined it for Hamilton, right? Were those penalties fair? What happened to George? We have Kimi Antonelli winning in Spa and extending his lead one more time. Is the championship over? We also have some drivers who did some unbelievable things on track. So did you all see Max's Q3 laps and the toe? Yeah, there was plenty of things that happened over the weekend to discuss about. So this is our Belgian GP 2026 weekend review. Hello everyone. Anderson here. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you all had a lovely weekend. I definitely enjoyed the hell out of the weekend because if you have been following, you know that this week we had a watch party. I will talk about it later, but let's get right into the weekend. This weekend was actually important for most teams as we are getting into a double header and a long summer break. A lot of driver decisions will be made during the break, so a lot of upgrades are also planned for the break. So the results and the performance of this week for the drivers and the teams are definitely going to play a huge role in making right decisions for these teams. So let's start with qualifying. I think there are two big talking points that I want to take my time on in explaining. First is Max Verstappen's Q3 laps and how Red Bull executed it. Most of the questions that I got on Instagram DMs were about toe, what it means and how did they execute it, how big a difference did it actually make, all of that. So let's talk about all of that. A lot of older fans know exactly what a toe is and how a toe works. So I'm just explaining it as simple as possible for the newer fans to catch up. Basically, the word toe, T-O-W, is an English verb. What does it mean? It means to pull something. To tow something means to pull something, right? You may have heard the word tow truck. Tow truck is the kind of truck that pulls on any of those crashed vehicles or something like that. Our traffic police definitely have a few of these tow trucks, and some accident recovery vehicles are basically tow trucks. So in Formula 1, there is an aerodynamic concept called the slipstream. There is definitely a little bit of physics, but it is not too complicated. So the air is transparent, right? Air, you can see through the air, but we also know that air is full of a lot of elements and molecules and atoms and all, right? It's a gas basically. So imagine if there is a layer of smoke, it just makes it a lot easier for us to understand. Air also has density, so it has some resistance, right? So what does that mean? Anytime something tries to go fast through the air resistance will try to slow it down. So let us say you are riding a bicycle or a bike, and then you lift yourself up and then you leave your hands and try to stretch it out, right? You can feel the air hitting the chest and slowing you down, right? It is kind of pulling you back, right? That is called air resistance. It's also called drag from the drag reduction system, DRS. It is exactly the same thing. It's called drag, or it is called air resistance. So all Formula 1 cars are designed in a way to aerodynamically provide the least amount of drag, which means you will pierce through the air as easy as possible. So imagine this piece of paper, okay? Now this piece of paper is going to be air for this demonstration. So this is a Formula 1 car, like nice and flat. And let us say a Formula 1 car goes through the air, right? What is it doing? It is basically pushing the air forward. The air is going to stay here, but the car is going to push the air forward, and it is going to make this kind of a shape, and it is going to go, right? So for a few seconds, the air is going to be in this shape, or at least the air is moving in this shape, like in this horizontal kind of shape. And the air that is standing here, the air that was once in this plane, is now suddenly pushed to this side because the car is dragging the air along with it. The easiest way for you to imagine this is, let us say you're standing on the side of a railway track and there is a train coming really fast. The minute the train goes by, for the first initial few seconds, you see the wind. It is almost as if it is pulling you in the direction of the train, right? But then after that, once the train goes by and all the carriages are going, that effect slowly slows down. That is literally what is happening here as well, right? When the car goes through, the air is pulled this way. So now that you understand this concept of drag and what happens when a car goes fast, there is also a small window between the first car going and another car coming and following it behind. The air is still going in this direction, right? So the second car does not get hit by the same stale air like this, right? Because the first car has already pushed the air in this direction and the air is going this way, right? the second car experiences a little less drag compared to the first car. And that is exactly why in Formula 1 races, when there is an overtake happening, you see the car behind lining up exactly behind the car in front, because it is getting the slipstream, it is getting closer, and just when they are about to overtake is when they pull to the left or the right and they make the pass. This is basically called slipstreaming when two drivers are fighting, right? Because the guy in the front doesn't want to let the car behind overtake. So to break the slipstream, what do? They drive like this. They weave back and forth, but weaving is dangerous on a straight line. So there are rules for how to break this kind of a slipstream. That's why we use the word slipstream when two drivers are fighting. But if the driver ahead is a friend, or if he is trying to help a teammate out, right, he will drive deliberately straight on purpose so that the car behind gets a little bit of the drag removed and they get a pull instead of a push. This is called a tow. Why? Because the car ahead virtually is pulling the car behind to get a little more speed and advantage, and it will save up in lap time. So why did Red Bull execute this tow? In Spa, Hadjar had a new power unit. Almost every component of the power unit was brand new, and because of that he had a 30 place grid penalty, which means no matter where he qualified, he is either starting in P20 or below. So Red Bull decided to make the most of the session and ensured Hadjar gave Max a tow. So now if you ask me why other teams don't do this more often and give a tow to a driver, it requires one person to sacrifice a lap so that the other person gains an advantage, right? So no driver is going to sacrifice a lap because they are all racing for themselves. So that is why you don't see this tow a lot often. But Red Bull, because Hadjar had nothing to lose, he was going to start from the back of the grid anyway, they decided in Q3 Hadjar will sacrifice his lap to give Max Verstappen a tow. And that's exactly how Red Bull executed it. They sent Hadjar and Max ahead of every other team during this Q3 session and made sure the track was relatively empty so that nobody can disturb them both. Hadjar was ahead. He went ahead a good 5-10 seconds ahead of Max, but he slowed down before sector 3, and through sector 3 he picked up the pace when Max was just behind him and gave an amazing tow. But you might also ask, how much is that tow worth in terms of lap time speed, right? Basically, it is worth anywhere from 0.2 to 0.3 seconds, and that is what we see in the data as well. But if Max did not qualify with that 0.3 seconds advantage, he would have started in P6 or P7, right? That's a huge difference between P2 and P7. So definitely Hadjar giving Max a tow was the reason Red Bull had a decent weekend to begin with. We will talk about Hadjar's performance a little later, but in the end of the day, that qualifying was a Red Bull masterpiece when it comes to tow. Obviously, Hadjar did not settle lap time at all in Q3. He was starting from P21 if I'm not wrong. Max Verstappen finally was starting from P2 front row again, but last time he started from the front row. We all know what happened. Weekend wasn't really smooth sailing for Red Bull from there, but we will get to the race in a bit. The other thing that I want to talk about is that Kimi took pole because he is Kimi Antonelli and he is in the fastest car on the grid. But another team that surprised me so much was McLaren. We were expecting this week to be a battle between the Mercedes and the Ferraris. Instead, it became a battle between Kimi Antonelli, Max Verstappen and the McLarens. Ferrari not being in the top 3 was a huge surprise, and Lando getting P3 in qualifying after having a 10 place grid penalty was even more heartbreaking. But the McLarens did have pace. What is scary is that the McLarens have the most powerful engine on the grid, and the only problem right now is that they are slowly trying to unlock its full potential. It is not fully unlocked, and their aerodynamics is also weak. So these two are areas that will continue to develop. That Mercedes engine, mind you, is still due an ADO upgrade, okay? McLaren are going to be a threat either towards the end of the season or by next season. Let's not forget, they are the reigning Constructors champions, and they have been Constructors champions for the last 2 years. I also also want to give a shout out to my boy Arvid Lindblad. What a man. This man had the fastest sector 1 in all of qualifying. How rare is that? It was in a Racing Bull's car, not even in a Red Bull car. You know how epic that is? I'll have to admit his car definitely had upgrades and it definitely helped him. And Liam will get the upgrade next week. But clearly Arvid isn't here to play catch up. He will become the number 1 driver of that team, I think. At least he clearly has the ambition to be the number 1 driver. What a phenomenal run. P6, his best ever qualifying result, and he's just been there in Formula 1 for 10 races, okay? Overall, an interesting and amazing qualifying session. Now let's get to the race. Now this is how the grid looked like when we started the race, because a lot of drivers had engine penalties and stuff. The grid was not the exact order of the qualifying. Kimi had a great launch. Max's car didn't break down at the start, which was a good thing. The last 2 times Max started from the front row, Miami and Monaco, yeah, it went horribly wrong for him. So I was just happy that he got off to a decent start. Now 2 interesting things happened from the start to the end of Kemmel Straight, okay? First one is Max had an overtake on Kimi on Eau Rouge. It looked epic. We all know how difficult it is to overtake on that uphill section. But here's the thing, analyzing it frame by frame, I saw something very, very interesting, okay? I saw that even at P2, Max was the first to open the active aero wing. Kimi delays opening the active aero, and by nature Kimi is already slow compared to Max when he's going into Rouge, right? So which meant Max always had the higher speed, but then suddenly Max runs out of energy towards the end, and I'm not sure if Kimi actually planned to let Max pass so that he can pass him back again, do a bit of yo-yo racing towards the end of the straight, but it ended up costing Max 2 places. Instead of him being in P1, he ends up at P3. Now in the end of the Kemmel Straight, when Kimi is passing Max Verstappen, out of nowhere there is a Ferrari also overtaking Max. Charles Leclerc got a good slipstream and was catching Max. But wait, wasn't George starting in P3? Where did Charles Leclerc come from all of a sudden? Yes, in the straight line, George has been falling down like a brick. The whole weekend, George has been complaining that there is something definitely wrong in George's car, especially his engine, because he is losing speed in a straight line where he's not even doing anything. He's just put his foot to the metal, but his car was losing speed. Definitely there was something wrong with the car. He's been cribbing and crying about not having the same car as Kimi. So a guy starts at P3 and in the main straight, he lost 3 positions to P6. Now obviously any driver who loses positions like this will try to make sure towards the end of the corner, he will try to make sure that he gets a couple of overtakes done, and that's exactly what George did. He was on the outside and he tried to overtake both Oscar and Lewis Hamilton, and that's when Lewis hit George, okay? The reason why I'm saying Lewis hit George is because yes, it was Lewis who hit George, and that was the end of George's race. I think what happened after the incident is also very, very noteworthy, okay? Clearly, there was something wrong with George's car. George expressed his frustration with unnecessary anger and borderline violence. But the funny thing is, Toto did not defend him at all. He basically said George had a bad weekend because of 2 reasons. One was the car, the other was his driving style. It wasn't George's fault that he wasn't as fast as Kimi in qualifying and even in the race. But clearly, Toto didn't have to air him to the public like that. But yeah, I'm not sure what is going to happen in the Mercedes paddock, in the Mercedes office rooms and in the debrief, because clearly George is not happy with the Mercedes and Toto is not happy with George. We will wait and see how this whole thing unfolds. It is not a great place to be for both George and Mercedes. Now let's talk about the incident itself. Lewis Hamilton's penalty. Was it Lewis's fault? Let's see what the stewards and the race directors had to say about it and the logic behind how they think the events unfolded. First, they are saying that George overtook Lewis and is entitled to some racing room. And then they go on to say that Lewis, despite his efforts to correct his steering, right, the oversteer that he got, the collision was caused by him, which is fair. Till here, it is absolutely correct. They went on to explain that Lewis did everything in his power to avoid the collision by leaving room. They also add that Lewis wasn't even driving aggressive to regain the position or anything. And because of that, they are giving him a 5-second penalty instead of a 10-second penalty. Here is my question. This has all the evidence of a first lap racing incident. So why was Lewis penalized in the first place? Shouldn't it have been 0 penalty, right? Why, instead of 10 seconds, we are giving him a 5-second penalty? This has also happened in the first 30 seconds of a race. I don't understand why this is a penalty. And it is not too far into the race where both of these cars are even fighting individually, right? I'm just baffled. But the only logic which is not mentioned in this document that I can think of why this penalty could have been given is because of the overall championship picture, right? The guy who is in P2 in championship is being hit by the guy who is in P3 in the championship, right? It is a lot higher up in both the championship points and in the race lead. Because of that, I think it was a little more severe. That is the only plausible explanation that I can think of. FIA also covered their butts by saying that, we could have given him a 10-second penalty, but we are sparing him and we're giving him a 5-second penalty. See, there are 2 more incidents which involves the stewards and race director that I will eventually get to, but the race now is effectively neutralized with the safety car. And after the safety car, the battle between Leclerc and Oscar kinda gave us something interesting to discuss again. Oscar is trying to overtake Leclerc on the outside, and suddenly Charles Leclerc decides that he will stick to the racing line and he corrects his position on the track, which ends up hitting Oscar. Now, was it done on purpose? I don't know. Hard battle, aggressive defending, looks like Charles Leclerc did it on purpose, right? The same portion of the track where Lewis hit George, not on purpose, Charles Leclerc has hit Oscar on purpose. Now you understand why it is so frustrating for Lewis Hamilton fans, right? If Lewis was given a penalty, why was Charles Leclerc not given a penalty? It looks confusing. But again, just like what we did in the previous instance, we will look at what the report and the document submitted by the stewards and the race directors say. By FIA's understanding, Oscar was not entitled to space over there because he hasn't overtaken Charles Leclerc yet, and Charles Leclerc was entitled to the racing line. So no further action because Charles Leclerc was ahead in that corner and Oscar had no business attempting to dive bomb or be side by side in that corner. It does make sense, but if, again, in my perspective, if Oscar had gotten significant damage that made him pit, or if he had gone off the track into the gravel and lost a lot of speed and pace, then I think Leclerc would have gotten a penalty. But again, I do think that stewards looked at the big picture scenario and gave away these decisions. I think these 2 decisions will continue to be debated for a while. I don't really have an answer which is so straightforward where one is fair and the other one is unfair. But for now, in this race, Lewis is carrying a 5-second penalty, which the team did not let him know. He was looking forward to his recommendation for the strategy, and then when it did not happen, they are like, we are on plan B. Why are we on plan B? Boss, you have a 5-second penalty, and I can understand why Lewis was frustrated on the radio. Every week, just when we think that Ferrari is going to sort their things out, they pull off something like this and we question, why do we even support this team? Even on their best day, they look so mediocre. While all of this was unfolding, waiting for investigation and all of these penalties, we have the return of the Papaya rules. Yes, Lando had one insane drive from P13 to P6 at the time, overtaking everyone, and suddenly was in a battle with Oscar. He is caught up with Oscar, and there was a bit of yo-yo racing happening, but McLaren had to come out on the radio asking them not to do any yo-yo racing. Vintage McLaren from 2025. They are both doing their own race. Lando is on a really good run. He has a new engine as well. Oscar has damage. Why do you not let them race? I don't understand what happens through their thought process. But 20 laps in, this is how the podium positions looked. Kimi P1, Max P2, and Charles Leclerc P3. And suddenly at lap 21, there is a VSC. Now this VSC is definitely a genuine VSC. A Marshall was cleaning something on track, but by lap 20, both Kimi and Max Verstappen had pitted, which means Charles Leclerc got an easy pit stop and the race lead. Ferrari got really lucky because they definitely were hoping for a VSC. They did the right thing of pitting Charles Leclerc under the VSC. They executed a perfect pit stop for Charles Leclerc and made 100% use of the VSC to mitigate the race for Charles Leclerc. I would love to appreciate Ferrari even more, but they never failed to disappoint me. They decided to double stack Charles Leclerc and Lewis. It was all going so well till Lewis's pit stop. The penalty was served correctly, the tires were all changed smooth, but with Ferrari it is never that simple, it is never over. Lewis was supposed to get a slight change of angles in the front wing, and then the left front mechanic who was supposed to make that change got run over by Lewis. He almost could have broken a hand or a leg. That looked really painful. Now Lewis was getting investigated for this unsafe release, and instead of getting a time penalty, he was fined. Now there is a bit of chatter online about this penalty because last year in Miami, when Max had an unsafe release, he got a 10-second penalty, right? Whereas Lewis got a fine. If you all thought earlier penalty was biased against Lewis, this looks like they let Lewis go free, and then clearly there were different rules for Max Verstappen, or at least on the surface, that's how it looks. But again, we do what we do. We go to the official report and see the reasoning. The reason for Lewis running over a mechanic was purely a team error. The team had not communicated to the jack man who releases, who puts the signal for Lewis to leave. They hadn't told him that there is an angle change that is waiting to happen. So he ended up giving the green signal much earlier and ahead of time, and Lewis saw the green signal and he did nothing wrong. He just bolted thinking, yeah, it is green, but yeah, he hit the mechanic while he was going through. Lewis also stopped and lost all the advantage that he had by pitting under the VSC, right? So he never gained any advantage. So because of that, stewards gave a fine to the team, to Lewis Hamilton, rather than a penalty. I get that the steward's job is really hard because every incident is very subjective, but my God, sometimes they come across as very, very biased. Max fans clearly are outraged that Lewis did not get a penalty. To be honest, even though I agree with the steward's logic here, at the time while watching the race, I thought this was definitely a penalty number 2 for Lewis. The stewards definitely are looking like they are being kind and lenient to Ferrari on the surface of it, at least. Now back to the race. Charles Leclerc is leading and Kimi had to clear him to get the win, which he manages to do. Easy peasy. A well-deserved win for Kimi. But what surprised me in all of this was that I assumed Kimi to bolt off from lap 1 and have a 15 or a 20 second lead when he was winning. But it wasn't that big a gap. It's basically 2 seconds between Charles Leclerc and Kimi at the end. That is not what I expected at all, but I am happy that the race unfolded this way. Let's talk a bit more about the moments that happened outside of the podium places. Norris stayed long in the beginning and the gap he built was completely ruined by a botched pit stop. So P7 is where he eventually finished. At least one Argentinian was having a good day this Sunday. A subtle dig at the Spain World Cup win. Congratulations, Spain. What was mad was the overtake Colapinto did on Lawson and Gasly. Easily the best overtake of the race. That overtake basically sealed his P10 and earned him that one extra point. Definitely worth watching the highlight just for this overtake. Hands down, the star of the day was Isack Hadjar. He was the reason Max got into the front row and got a podium, had a decent weekend, and then this man went on to go from P21 to P6. 15 positions gained. That includes positions he gained through pitting and also his overtakes. What do you mean there is a second driver curse at Red Bull? What a man. He is my definite 100% driver of the day. Big claps, big appreciations for my boy. Another big day for Arvid Lindblad as well. His race pace was really impressive. Realistically, he should have been P8, but he lost out to Bortoleto and Audi under the VSC. So yeah, fairs, it was a strategy call. Bortoleto was P8 and this guy ended up in P9. Arvid, not a bad result at all. Overall, an interesting race. I also want to add the fact that I watched this race live with a bunch of you who showed up for the watch party at the Rumor Lounge. Thank you so much to everyone who dropped by. I'm gonna play a bunch of clips here. I actually recorded our live reaction to our lap 1. You should see why my voice sounds like this, because I was screaming throughout the first lap. It was incredible and amazing to meet a few fellow F1 fans. We have a passionate community of F1 fans growing in Hyderabad. I definitely think that the first lap was the most interesting bit of the race. Our live reactions clearly does prove it. We had our own podium celebration standing in front when the national anthems were being sung, right? So definitely this was fun. We should do it again. I was just thinking, if Hyderabad was this exciting, imagine how cool it would be to have a Chennai watch party. So hit me up if somebody is willing to host me. I am more than happy to come and hang out in Chennai. I am based out of Hyderabad. It's a little bit far, but I would definitely drop by and have more fun with you all. And onwards to my predictions. Let's see how my predictions went. I clearly seem to have more faith in the Ferrari boys than Ferrari themselves, because these were my predictions. I predicted Charles Leclerc on pole. Nah, not even close. I somehow hoped Ferrari would just rule the weekend, but just didn't happen. My second prediction, Lewis will win. Yep, he won the most number of penalties in the race. Third prediction was Max will be back on the podium. Yes, got one right. Let's go. I didn't jinx him this time. Fourth prediction, Red Bull's double point streak will be broken this week. Yes, it did happen. I also added that Arvid will score points, but Liam will not. Exactly got it right. Nailed it. Yes, point number 2. And my fifth prediction was, Cadillac will score points. It was never going to happen. I will continue to hope though. I will continue to hope for Bottas and Perez to just at least finish the season with something, some 1 point, please. 2 out of 5 predictions got it right. Just to pass. This has been an interesting race week. But guess what? It's race week all over again. And I'm actually traveling back to Tirunelveli again this week. I have to figure out my schedules to record, but because half the days I am spending time traveling. Please forgive me if the videos are not up on time, but there will definitely be a lot more videos incoming. I have one more video on the Belgian GP definitely coming, and the rest of the videos will be about the Hungaroring and Hungarian GP, right? So stay subscribed, smash that like button, share these videos with your other Formula One friends. Let's all come together in the comment section and discuss all of what happened in the race. Leave your favorite moments in the race in your comments, and I will see you all in the next video. Okay, peace.